Hello, my name is Taylor Ross. I'm an Aximmetry ambassador and the owner of Frustum Virtual in Los Angeles, California. In this tutorial, I'll be going over Aximmetry Gateway. Aximmetry Gateway is a software capable of transmitting video, tracking, and controller data. It can also receive video once it's been composited on your main computer. It can be used in cases where the device inputs are on one computer, but the compositing is done on a different computer. Upon launching Aximmetry Gateway, it automatically tries to open the most recent setup. If the file cannot be found, you'll be notified and can choose to open another file or create a new one. On the first launch, a new setup is automatically created. Upon creating or loading a setup, you are greeted with 4 sections, 3 responsible for sending data, and the last for receiving and outputting it. These sections can be filled with panels, each responsible for handling and transferring a specific group of devices. You can add new panels to the sections by clicking the plus sign at the top right corner of each section. If you don't need some panels, you can easily remove them by clicking the close button at the top right corner of the panel. Video inputs and camera tracking panels are created and removed in pairs, as they are usually used in pairs. This makes working with them a bit more straightforward. If you don't need camera tracking, simply leave the tracking device and/or zoom device empty. The same goes for your video inputs. If you only want to send tracking data, you can leave your input devices under video inputs blank. I'm just going to go ahead and close this panel. Now that we've briefly covered our 4 sections and how to add and remove panels, I'm going to go ahead and set up my project frame rate. You can do this by navigating to Edit in the upper left-hand corner and selecting Preferences. On the left-hand side of our preferences, select Rendering. Use the drop-down next to Frame Rate to select the frame rate of your project. For my project, it's going to be 24 frames per second. I'll select Apply and OK. I'll navigate back to Edit in the upper left-hand corner and select Video Outputs. If sync is set for any of your video output devices, the sync frame rate will overwrite the project frame rate. I'm going to make sure that sync is not selected for any of my video output devices, and then I'm going to hit Apply and OK. Once we're happy with the project frame rate, the next thing that we need to do is set up the server. Aximmetry defines the server as the PC where the compositing will be taking place. This is the PC that will be running Aximmetry DE Composer. To set up our server settings, we'll navigate to Edit in the upper left-hand corner and select Preferences. On the left-hand side of our preferences, we'll select Server Setup. Hostname is where we will input the IP address of the system that is running Aximmetry DE Composer. The OSC port is where the controller data will be sent to. For this tutorial, I've set up a static IP address on each system. This entire process will also work over Wi-Fi. I've just found it to be a lot more stable on a static IP. Once I have the hostname and OSC port set up, I can select Apply and OK. Once the server setup is done, 2 other steps are required to be able to transmit data from Aximmetry Gateway: defining the data to be transmitted and defining the channels the data will be transmitted by. In each section handling inputs and sending data, you can select the device with its related settings to transmit data. Software-based devices including tracking data protocols must first be created under Edit, Manage Devices. This is where you're able to manage all of the devices that you're able to add the same way that you would in Aximmetry DE Composer. So now that we've gone over our sections and panels, I'm going to start by setting up my video inputs. I will select this drop-down next to Input Devices. I will then select my Blackmagic DeckLink SDI 4K. Once that's selected, you should be able to see the live video preview. If you hover your mouse over this image, it will get bigger so that you can see it a little bit better. Next, we need to set up our transmit channel. Transmitting video happens via the SRT protocol. When the transmit channel setup button is pressed, an SRT setup dialog comes up. With the connection mode set to caller, the host is already set from the server setup page. The only thing we need to worry about in the caller connection mode is the port number. For my port number, I'm going to input a value of 1024. No special ports are officially assigned to the SRT protocol, so any port number can be used except 0. Port numbers between 1024 and 49151 are recommended. Valid values for port and local port are between 1 and 65535. Based on the connection mode of your choice, some adjustable parameters may not appear to you. In caller mode, both port and local port can be set. In this mode, local port is where the answer packets come back to. When left empty, the operation chooses a port automatically. Defining the local port is mostly useful for diagnosing network problems. I'm not going to cover all the settings for SRT protocol in this tutorial. There will be a link in the description of this video to the SRT documentation from Aximmetry. So now that I have my port number set, I'm going to hit Enter on my keyboard and then select OK. You can see now that the transmit channel has been updated with the information that we input in the SRT setup. Next, we're going to set up our camera tracking. I will start by selecting my tracking device using the drop-down next to Tracking Device. I'm using the Game Anti-Latency Camera 0. And then for my zoom device, I'm using LowNet 2. I'm also going to set my calibration profile for the lens and camera that I'm currently using. This is a calibration profile that we created using the Aximmetry camera calibrator. If you need help with the Aximmetry camera calibrator, check out the other tutorials on our channel. Tracking data is transmitted using the format and target port setting on the camera tracking panel. It is sent to the server specified on the server setup page. I'm going to leave my target port set to the default 17501. If you are transmitting tracking data to another Aximmetry, it is recommended that you use Axibridge. If the connection is unstable, use Axibridge TCP. For other applications, use the format that is supported at the other end. When selecting FreeD, the forwarding camera ID will be 0. For this tutorial, I will be leaving it set to Axibridge. There will be a link in the description of this video to all of the documentation for these different formats. Next, we need to set up our video outputs. To receive the final output from the server, one or more video output panels must be created. The final output is received via SRT protocol. When the Receive Channel Setup button is pressed, an SRT setup dialog comes up. With the connection mode set to caller, the host is already set from the server setup page. Just like before, the only setting that we really need to change is the port number. I've set the port number for this SRT channel to 2048. Unlike Aximmetry Composer's default settings for an SRT video input device, the default connection mode for the receiving channel here is set to caller instead of listener. This is because Aximmetry Gateway requires this configuration when using the most common network setup. If left unchanged, the connection mode must be switched from caller to listener when creating the SRT video out device in Aximmetry Composer. The final composite can be output to any 2 video out devices by selecting them from the Output to drop-down menus. For auto configuration, use the Configure button. Next, I'm going to select my Stream Deck and my controller devices. Transmitting controller inputs happens via the OSC protocol. No further setup is required. The host name and the OSC port on the server setup define where the OSC message will be sent. So now that we have everything set up in Aximmetry Gateway, we'll go ahead and open our Aximmetry DE Composer. I've opened a project that I've already created and cooked in Aximmetry DE Composer. I'll go ahead and show you my compound so you can see that it's my Mixcam Unreal 3 cam and a Unreal project that's been cooked in Unreal Editor for Aximmetry. To receive the data transmitted by Gateway, a device for each input in Composer should be created under Edit, Manage Devices. To receive the video transmitted by Gateway, an SRT video device must be created corresponding to the video input's transmitted channel on the transmitting machine. Once the device is configured, it can be used in Composer as a video input. At the top of our Manage Devices, we have 2 different types of SRT. The SRT under Video is our video input. This SRT will be used to receive our live incoming camera feed from Aximmetry Gateway. The SRT located under Video Out is the SRT output back to Aximmetry Gateway. So in order to get our SRT video from Aximmetry Gateway, we're going to set an SRT input. So I'll go ahead and select Add. I'll give this SRT channel a name. I'll call this Gateway In, because this will be the channel for our live camera feed. For the connection mode, I'll have this set to listener. For my local port, I will input 1024 to match what we set up in Aximmetry Gateway. For this adapter setting, I can specify the IP address. Just click this dropdown and select the IP address you'd like to use. We didn't set up a passphrase, so I'll just select OK. Now we need to set up our video out. Again, we'll set up an SRT. This will be going back to Aximmetry Gateway. I'll select Add and give this a name. We'll call this Gateway Out. We need to change the connection mode to listener. We can set the adapter to the IP address and change the local port to 2048. So if you remember when we were setting up our video outputs from Aximmetry Gateway, we left the connection mode of the SRT channel set to caller. So in Composer, we need to change it from the default caller to listener. Again, we didn't select a passphrase, so I'm just going to select OK. Next, we'll set up our OSC. Navigate to the OSC section and select Server. To receive controller data, the OSC server must be set corresponding to the server setup on the transmitting machine. In most cases, identical port numbers are enough. The default port number in Aximmetry Gateway is 8000, so I don't need to make any changes. Finally, we will scroll down to our camera tracking section. Find Axibridge. You just need to select the format that you set up in Aximmetry Gateway. I used Axibridge. Once Axibridge is selected, select Add in the upper right-hand corner. Use the adapter dropdown to select the IP address. I left my UDP port in Aximmetry Gateway set to the default 17501. If you change the camera tracking UDP port, you'll need to update that here. Now I can select OK to create that Axibridge channel. That should be all of the different settings that we need to set up in the Manage Devices menu. We can select Apply and OK to save these settings. Now I can navigate to the tracked inputs. I can select Input 4. With Input 4 selected, the settings will appear on the right-hand side. I'm going to change my camera device to my SRT Gateway in. My camera mode is 1080p at 24. For my tracking device, I'm going to select Axibridge. My calibration profile and zoom device will remain blank. The video frames and tracking data sent via Aximmetry Gateway will have Aximmetry's base timecode embedded. All inputs will be timecode synced, so you need to turn on the timecode sync switch for your input and also set the tracking delay and zoom delay values to 0. We will input the tracking and zoom delay in Aximmetry Gateway, which is why we will leave it blank here. Some tracking formats do not support the use of timecode, for example FreeD. In this case, timecode sync will not work. Aximmetry recommends using a tracking format that does support timecode, like Axibridge. In the lower right-hand corner of my Composer window, you will see these no input messages. This is because we need to start the stream in Aximmetry Gateway. So back on the PC that's running Aximmetry Gateway, I will navigate to the top and find Start Stream. I'll go ahead and select this. This will start the transmission of information between Aximmetry Gateway and Aximmetry DE Composer. Once the stream begins, you should see a live camera feed coming into Aximmetry DE Composer from Aximmetry Gateway. Aximmetry DE Composer should now also be receiving the camera tracking data from Aximmetry Gateway. So now as I move my physical camera around, it should update in real time in Aximmetry DE Composer. You'll notice that my background is not perfectly in sync with the objects that I'm filming. This is because I need to set up the tracking delay. The best way I found to do this is in my tracking inputs, input 4. I'm going to select Detect Tracking Delay, and then I'm going to rotate my camera left and right. Delay found in set 11.1 frames. So now I'm going to take this information and input it in Aximmetry Gateway. So now back on the PC running Aximmetry Gateway, I will find these delay settings, and I will input 11.1. In the camera tracking panel, you will also see TC Sync and Zoom TC. TC Sync or timecode sync should be checked if your camera tracking device is timecode synced. Zoom TC is timecode sync for the Zoom device. This box should be checked if your camera and Zoom device are timecode synced. In our video inputs panel, we also have a timecode master. If the timecode master checkbox is checked, the video inputs timecode will be used as the timecode for synchronizing all video and tracking data. The timecode master checkbox is used if every input is connected to a timecode generator. If the timecode master checkbox is left unchecked, Aximmetry's base timecode will be used for synchronizing all video and tracking data. Once the delay has been set, we can move our camera around to check that our subject is no longer out of sync with our background. The last thing we need to do is fix this no input message that we're getting back in Aximmetry Gateway. In Aximmetry Composer, we need to navigate to Edit, Video Outputs. You'll see the SRT Gateway out. It has no index. We'll set this index to index 5 and then select Apply and OK. And then in order to make sure that we're sending the final pixel output, we'll navigate to Edit, Preferences, find Channel Matrix. And then for the SRT Gateway out, we want to make the source channel, Channel 2. Source channel 2 is the same as the final pixel preview that you see here, preview 2. Once that's set, I can hit apply and OK. And so now back in Aximmetry Gateway, we should be receiving the final pixel preview that we saw in Aximmetry DE Composer. Everything should now be set up and working between Aximmetry Gateway and Aximmetry DE Composer. Hopefully this video was helpful in getting you started with Aximmetry Gateway. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos, and thanks for watching.